Hello and welcome to the Japanaholic podcast surrounded by topics about Japan discussed by one certified Japanaholic. I am your host, Taylor Frey, and I'm still stuck in quarantine, so what better time to learn Japanese than today, or at least in today's age, I guess, where we're stuck in this mess that we're all in. I'm pretty sure I am not the only one who's lately been taking this opportunity to learn a different language, especially Japanese in my case. For anybody who doesn't know, I've been learning Japanese for about close to a year. Not exactly a year just quite yet, but I want to say it's about 8 months. I started really learning it in June, so it may be close to a year, but I'm not sure. I'm trying to think, but anyways, a couple weeks ago when I was talking with Alex, I was discussing with him about, me learning Japanese and, my plans for the future in terms of learning Japanese. For many people who are wanting to learn Japanese, whether that be in the near future or whether they are learning Japanese right now, I've decided to go over quite a few different ways that I've been learning Japanese and possibly give off some tips and advice, kind of like in a level system. There's four different ways of learning Japanese, and I've gone through all four of these so far. Well, I know there's more than four, but I've kind of slimmed it. I've kind of made it to where it's a wide variety of choices in a way between these four. And I am sorry if I do sound sicker than usual, because as of recording this, allergy season has kicked the third gear. So, yeah, I probably don't sound too different. It's probably my microphone that's making me sound different. Because I always have... Because the microphone that I'm using is but it's a blue snowball microphone, so it's not the greatest in the world. I'm sorry. But I don't really want to use a headset when recording podcast episodes. Mainly because that headset captures a lot of movement, I guess, in me. Because when I move my head, you can hear a little bit of crackling because of the headset moving. But anyways, continuing on. Today I'm going to go over kind of four different levels of Japanese learning. Okay, starting off with the basics of Japanese learning, which is learning through anime. I've discussed this way too many times, but not enough times on the podcast, that you can't really be fluent in Japanese because of anime. You can only learn so much Japanese through anime. You can become really good at Japanese, like pronunciations, but then again, it is a seiyuu or a voice actor saying Japanese, and there's hundreds of different ways to say Japanese, like there's hundreds of ways to speak English, with different accents and different country dialects and stuff like that, or region dialects in Japanese cases. But, I'll probably go more in detail about, whether or not you can actually become a fluent person in Japanese just by watching anime, or, go more in depth about the Japanese language in the next coming weeks. But I'll try to keep things brief here with this first level here. But this is how basically all Japanese learners start off with. They usually just start off by picking, some popular animes and stuff like that, and then go off of learning Japanese from there. No exception for me. I started watching animes just last year, and, I didn't really start learning the language till about June or July or August. I'm not sure when I actually downloaded, Duolingo, or because Duolingo was the first app I downloaded for languages. If I can go back in my thing, I can possibly say, possibly in a couple episodes or two. But, anyways, a lot of people learn Japanese through anime. You can really learn a good amount of language, a good amount of the language in animes, but you can't become very fluent in it. Like I said, it's a whole different topic that I'll go over in the next couple of weeks. But number 2 on the list, do I have my phone on me? Shoot, I do not. Crap. All right. Well, on my original take, I used my phone for this because I had apps on my phone that I wanted to talk about. But speaking of that, most people who start learning Japanese go ahead and like download apps and stuff on their phones and look up websites on the computer and learn from there. Some apps and some websites that I do recommend using. Okay. The first one in the most, it's like the most popular and the most, kind of the easiest way to learn Japanese, but not fluent Japanese, is Duolingo. Whoever like starts learning languages usually starts off by using Duolingo to help learn the alphabet in a way, to help learn some basic sentences and stuff like that. I used it for a couple weeks. Actually, no, couple months. Excuse me. Especially at my school, I had at least for this last trimester before it got closed because of COVID. I actually had a Japanese class where I was going to be sitting in a room for 12 weeks straight using Duolingo. Well, that would have been cool had it not freaking closed down. So, yay. It ended up being like 2 weeks instead of 12. So, but still, that was still good enough for me to learn a little bit of Japanese. Because, 10 minutes of Japanese a day at least goes a long way, okay? Even if it's just like the basics of things, okay? If you like study for like 2 hours a day or like, every so often, like every other day, maybe an hour or two, that goes a long way. You don't have to study like 5 hours a day or something like that. You don't have to go crazy. Something as little as like 10 minutes a day goes a long way. But anyway, I was in there for about an hour and a half, close to an hour and a half every single day. So got a good bit of Japanese. I mean, it was mostly just me reading hiragana and katakana, but the very basics of Duolingo, at first. Had I continued taking that class, it probably would have been a whole different story, but whatever. But yeah, like Duolingo is a really good website. It's a real good app to use for learning learning languages like French, German, Russian. It helps. Okay, it's a good start, but I've said this a few times. I just don't find Duolingo to be the greatest way of learning Japanese in a fluent way. Because once you become more in depth with Duolingo, you'll notice that there's, repeating like sentences, and it's like you'll learn how to say like today or right now, and you'll learn like vocabulary, but learning sentences in Duolingo is just in a way difficult for a basic learner, and most of the sentences you learn sometimes will not be useful in any situation possible. Okay, for example, I'm on a Japanese learning Facebook group, and there's been many times where I've scrolled through the page and I've seen somebody post a picture of them learning the language in Duolingo, and one of the sentences is translated to, and I'm not kidding when I say this, I am an apple. And, it's like, you don't need that sentence ever. Could have probably had it like, this is an apple or something like that, I don't know. But Duolingo is a good start, okay? For learning languages in like a phone or an app, or phone or a website, excuse me. But the best, and the most recommended that I can throw out there, okay, is Lingodeer. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people who know what Lingodeer is, but I could be wrong. And for anybody who does not know what Lingodeer is, oh my god, for it being like $8 a month, on $8 to $10 a month, it depends on what device you're using, because I think it varies between devices. Because I noticed when I was on an Android device, it was like $11 or something like that a month, and then my iPhone is like $8. So I could be wrong though. They could have upped the price recently, but I'm still paying like $8 a month. It's not free, but when you're learning a language, I don't think you can really become you can't become fluent in a language if you don't spend a little bit of money. Not saying, you don't have to spend like hundreds of dollars, but it's like, at least spend like $30 on like a textbook, or $30 for like a uh a learning software like Lingodeer or Japanese Pod 101, which I'll get into in just after I talk about Lingodeer, because that's another one I recommend. But if you buy Lingodeer, you have two options. You could buy like the regular like Lingodeer, which is just like the usual like here's the line of text and sentence structures and blah 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 blah. But they also have a gaming app that is separate from their original thing. So if you're more of a gaming learner, like if you like to play games to learn, which it does help, I'll admit it does help. You can pay for that as well, which is possibly the same price. I think it's $5. It's a little cheaper. So since it is like a brand new app, I do expect it to go up a little bit more by the end of this year. So quickly get it and buy like a month or two while you can before it starts rising in prices because of how in-depth it's becoming, because it's really good. It's really freaking good. But like if we're talking about the normal like Lingodeer app, you can learn so much. Okay, so much stuff. They have like two Japanese courses, and they have like a fluent Japanese guidebook, a travel guidebook, and they have like several different guidebooks. Okay, for Japanese. They also have like French, Russian, German, Italian, the good old Italian language that I'm probably going to learn also, probably once I become a little bit more fluent in Japanese. But that'll probably be in a few years. Just know that Lingodeer is one of my favorites because of how I've learned so much from Lingodeer, and I can't recommend Lingodeer enough to anybody who's learning Japanese and who hasn't, used Lingodeer. The free version doesn't really give you too much in depth. Like I think it gets rid of some of the learning tips or whatever, but you can still learn quite a bit just from using the free version by itself. So, if you don't want to spend too much money, Lingodeer is possibly one of the better options to use, because even though if you want to learn like sentence structures and learn like an easy way to get through the courses and stuff like that, you would use like the learning tips from the premium version, which does cost a little bit of money, but that's fine. In my case, it is fine. It's not expensive, so if it's not expensive, I'm not gonna really complain about it. It's not like Rosetta Stone, where it's like $200 freaking bucks for nothing. So, but let me move on to Japanese Pod 101. Japanese Pod 101 is the biggest website for learning Japanese, obviously, because even on their YouTube channel, you can learn quite a bit of phrases. So if you want to check out like Japanese Pod 101, check out their YouTube channel, because they are freaking incredible with their content. Because it's easy to learn some of the content if you are like a visual learner. Because everybody that works over at Japanese Pod 101 is a native Japanese speaker. So you could easily learn Japanese from them. But Japanese Pod is a little bit more expensive to get the premium version. I think it's like $12 a month. I'm not entirely sure. I could be wrong on all these prices. It's just a rough estimate because I really haven't bought the premium version of Japanese Pod in quite some time. I used to use it when I first started learning Japanese, but the reason why I stopped using it was because I couldn't really find the time to learn Japanese through Japanese Pod 101. But even then, if you sign up for like their daily word of the day emails, that still goes a long way, because every day they send me like a word or two through the emails, and I have to guess what word it is, and then they give me like 4 sentences of that said word, which is really helpful in many ways than one. But Japanese Pod 101 really is a good website to use. I also have an iPhone app, but it's called like Innovative. Yeah, Innovative. So that is if you do plan on learning Japanese, then I would give Japanese Pod 101 a try as well, because not only could you like learn through videos, but you could also learn through audio, because they have like this little radio. I think you could actually find their radio episodes on Spotify, or on iTunes as well. I'm not sure. I could be wrong on that, but They have like they have an audio section where you can learn some Japanese dialogues and some conversations through the audio portion of Japanese Pod 101. And if you buy the premium version, you can get a transcript of the said audio portion where you can read it if you're more of a reader. And I'm trying to think of what else the premium version has. There's so many good freaking things about Japanese Pod 101 that I would recommend. I would recommend using that, but I still recommend Lego Deer if you do plan on like being mainly on your phone. But if you plan on being on the computer more, go with Japanese Pod 101 because it's more in depth on the computer and it's more easily accessible on their website. And it's kind of like, in a way, it's like how Lingo Deer's website is kind of iffy at times, and how the Japanese Pod 101 phone app, Innovative, is a little iffy at times with figuring out stuff. Because with Japanese Pod 101, you start at like the beginner levels, and then it works your way up from there, going through like different stages and stuff like that of like what's it called, courses and stuff like that, and lessons. Whereas on the Innovative app, you would have to like find it yourself, and it's you can't really go from like level 0 to level like 4 or whatever their level system is. And Lego Deer's website, it's a little bit of a hassle, but it's not as bad as people think it is. There's also like several different apps that I've used as well. There's an app just called Japanese with an exclamation point, and it has the hiragana symbol for A. I think it's A or A. I think so. It's either, I can't remember. My phone's not with me at this point, so I can't tell you. But I just have to go off the top of my head. But it helps with drawing hiragana, and there's also like some flashcards or whatever that I use. It's really good. I do recommend it, but it does cost just a tad bit of money, not too much. So there's that one, and then there's this app called Kana that a lot of people don't seem to use too much, but it gives you all of the hiragana, all of the katakanas. It puts it in a little like quiz kind of thing, and you have to like see how quickly you can memorize each and every one of the hiragana and katakanas, which in my case, I've gotten used to all of hiragana, but I can't get all of katakana just quite yet. And kanji, I probably know about 5 kanjis. So, the best way to learn kanjis is like in level 3, I guess, because unfortunately, there's not too many apps with kanji in there. The one I could recommend to stick with level 2 for just a moment with apps, the one I could recommend the most for like learning kanjis is this app called Mochi Mochi. Where it gives off like like you could actually learn some Japanese end levels from there. So like I've been learning N5, so I can easily learn a couple things from that. Which is really helpful. I mean, if you're wanting to learn like N5 or N4, N3, N2, or N1 Japanese levels, Mochi Mochi is one of the apps where it can actually help you in that. So if you're learning kanji, I would recommend using that app, because that one's actually I'm gonna say it does cost like possibly like $3, but like I said, I could be wrong. I think it may be free, but I could be entirely wrong. Again, sorry if I am wrong. But now let's move on to level 3, which level 3 is if you're really more into like learning via books. Okay, if you're not so much of a learner from like online, or if you find learning through like books and stuff to be quite your style, which it is for me. I'm a mix of all 4 of these levels. So I learned through anime, I learned through using like Duolingo, Lingo Deer, and all the apps I just talked about. But I also learned through books, more specifically like textbooks and stuff like that you can buy off like Amazon for like $20-$30 or something like that. What I actually got in my hand right now is the Ultimate Japanese Phrase book by Kit Pancoast Nagamura and Kokyo Tsuchiya. I was recommended this book by Chris Broad, who, like, I saw the video of him going through his bookcase and stuff like that, and he pulled out one of the books, and one of the books he mentioned was the Ultimate Japanese Phrase book, and I thought, that looks like an interesting book for me, because of the fact that it says on the front cover that it's 1,800 sentences for everyday use, 1,800 sentences, and it's like, who would not want this book for anybody learning Japanese? Because this book goes from even in the beginning, for like a complete, like in like page 21 or whatever, they go over all of the particles. So you can even learn how to, like, speak the particles and stuff like that. And you got, word order, pronunciations, and then, you get to like the very basics. You got the wakarimashita. Ikimashou, sugoi ne, chotto matte, tasukete, hayo gozaimasu. You got the basics. And then the farther you get into the book, which is like 320 pages big, okay, you got more and more like difficult sentences, and even some that are on the 18 plus side, wink wink. But I recommend using the Ultimate Japanese Phrase book. That cost me about $20, and it was really good for about that thing being 300 freaking pages. That thing almost costs as much as a manga on Barnes and Nobles. Just saying, that thing is really useful. But I can't recommend that book enough. And then I also recommend like learning some the best way to learn kanji, in my opinion, is learning through like books and stuff, and like handwritten books, because there's some kanji books. Do I have one on me right now? I don't think so. Damn it. Wait, no. Dang it. Anyway, but I have these like kanji handbooks or whatever, where it gives me the kanji, it gives me like how you say this kanji, and it gives me a way to remember it. But the main part is stroke orders and how to actually draw out the kanjis. I've used that book quite a bit. It's difficult to use it when you're not in a school setting, or when you're in a very learning style mood or whatever. So the only reason I would recommend using the books is if you're really into like reading and writing, while at the same time, if you are in like a school setting, like if you're just in a school and you're bored, and you want to learn some kanji, that's a way as well. But I don't know. I don't do much like reading and writing outside of school, like textbook wise, because the last thing I want to do when I'm at my house is pull out a textbook and write stuff in my freaking textbook. I want to do that at school, but since I'm a high school graduate now, I can't really do that, can I? But there's so many different like kanji books and like Japanese like learning books, that even if you're away from your phone, away from your computer, don't have access to internet, it's still so easy to learn Japanese through those said handbooks and said textbooks, that it's like, it's probably the most expensive option, because, well, I want to say that, but the fourth one's kind of way out there, but we'll get to that in just a moment. But like, outside of like apps, outside of like, everything else in the world, the books are probably the best option, okay? Because like I said, even though this phrase book cost me like $25 or whatever, you got 320 pages of Japanese learning, and it's like, most of these things in this phrase book, you can pretty much use almost on a daily basis. I mean, it's literally on the front cover, 1,800 sentences for everyday use. And I couldn't be more wrong about that the more you read it. I mean, probably about half of those you probably don't want to use if you want to get your ass kicked or something like that. Damn it, my voice cracked. But, yeah. Probably one of my favorite books to read is that book right there. And I can't recommend that book enough. But there's also, like, kanji handbooks and stuff like that. Now, as well as Japanese mangas. Okay, if you can find the manga versions or the Japanese versions of said mangas, possibly that is another way of learning it. But you would have to learn how to read hiragana. You would have to learn how to read katakana and maybe some kanji, but they do give off the hiragana they do give off the hiragana of it right next to it. At least for some of the mangas that I have in Japanese. I have the Domestic Nakanojo's first volume in Japanese. So that's it. That's a way for me to learn, in a weird way, learn some Japanese there. But you would have to learn how to read hiragana, and you would have to learn what each of the vocabularies mean and stuff like that. It's kind of up there. If you could read Japanese mangas like in the Japanese language, then you're clearly getting somewhere with your Japanese learning. So good on you if you can do that. And this final one, this one is something like not a whole lot of Japanese learners will do if they are like a level 1, because most people probably won't jump to level 4 here if you're only listening or if you're only watching anime and not really learning for like different other, like, from level 2 or level 3. And that's getting into the Japanese culture itself. What I mean by this is, you don't just watch anime. You listen to Japanese music. You watch other Japanese, like, television shows. You read up on Japanese news. Just get into the Japanese culture. Because the more you get into the Japanese culture, the more you understand the Japanese language. And the more you realize that, oh, that's why they say it like this and not like this. Because the biggest example of this is the difference between kiego, which is formal talk, and non-kiego, which is non-formal talk. To an outsider who literally only watches anime, they wouldn't know the difference between kiego and non-kiego. Okay? Formal talk versus informal talk. It's kind of like how in English, we have our polite talk, and then there's also times in English where we don't have our polite talk. I'll go more, I don't want to go more in depth in this right now because that would take me an hour to explain in a way. And I'm going to explain more about the Japanese language later down the road, especially when I get more fluent in the language itself. But, when you learn the language, you got to know the difference between kiego and non-kiego. But if you don't if you don't go on level 4 style, learning ways, which is you learn the language through YouTubers like Yuta and Dogen and abroad in Japan when he does his Japanese learning kind of things, or you listen to Japanese music and study the lyrics between the lyrics of everything there in the Romanji system and in the English system and that sort of stuff. I would not recommend learning Romanji too much because in Japanese there's 3 different learning systems. There's 3 different scripts: hiragana, katakana, and kanji. But there's also a 4th one, which is Romanji, which is English typed writing or whatever. I would not recommend basing off everything you learn in Japanese off that, because it is almost impossible to learn Japanese if you're only learning through Romanji. If you're only reading the English part of the text, it's not you won't get too far. You can learn it, that's how you learn how to say it, but you gotta mainly learn what it looks like in Japanese text, like with kanji, hiragana, and katakana at times. That's just, that's common sense, in my opinion. But, you gotta learn Japanese through, podcasts, if you want to. Which I forgot to mention this in level 2, actually. If you want to learn podcasts, or if you want to learn Japanese, you could also listen through it through, podcasts and stuff like that. Tofugu, I think that's how you say it. Podcast. Is a Japanese learning podcast that I've listened to quite a bit, where they take a few different Japanese learning topics and they just branch off of that for 50 minutes to an hour each episode while promoting their Watakani website. Absolutely recommend that, because if you want to learn Japanese and you're you're in a podcast mood, there you go. But yeah, just like learn the culture, because the more culture of Japan you learn, the more of the language you also learn, because it helps to learn why Japanese people speak this way while also speaking it completely different in anime. Because in most animes, they don't give a crap about the whole Keigo and non-Keigo thing. Yuta, a YouTuber named Yuta, um, he spoke about this when speaking about Megumin and how she speaks Japanese. He mentioned that Megumin uses Keigo to most of her party mates. Well, actually, all of her party mates. The only time she really doesn't, she still uses it to Yunyun on occasions. Yunyun even uses Keigo to most people, but Yunyun doesn't use Keigo to Megumin at times. But anyway, Yuta is probably one of the bigger ways of learning Japanese, because he talks about Japanese culture while discussing the Japanese language. So that's the biggest example I could give off of that. Now before I head off before I end off this podcast for the week, I just want, there's a question that, always gets asked when learning the Japanese language, that I kind of want to answer today. And that's, when learning the Japanese language, is it really necessary to become so fluent in Japanese in today's world? Is it really necessary to become so fluent in Japanese that you could almost speak it natively in today's world? To that I say, to a fluent native language style level, possibly not, if you don't plan on going to Japan in the future for like months on end, or for, to move in general. Okay? Even when you're visiting Japan, you don't really need to have like that much of Japanese levels to get by in Japan. It's kind of most commonly known that even if you just plan on visiting Japan and, and you're going for like 2 weeks or something like that, you don't need that much Japanese knowledge to survive in Japan. You need a little bit, but you don't need like the most advanced stuff, okay? It's recommended though, because, obviously the more of the language you know, the easier it is on your trip and stuff like that, especially if it's your first time going, like me in October. So, but, if you don't have a future plan with Japan, it's probably not the greatest idea to learn the language. Now, there is a couple exceptions. If you do have, like, Japanese foreign exchange students coming to your area, yeah, obviously, if you want to become friends with them, you do want to, speak some Japanese to them. So, there's some exceptions. I can't really give off a definitive answer whether or not, it's worth learning Japanese when you don't really have any plans of moving to Japan or visiting Japan in that instance. It's difficult. It depends on your situation. If you have a Japanese friend, or if you have a Japanese foreign exchange student, yeah, you probably want to learn some Japanese so you become friends with them and, teach them some English as well, or, your native language as well. But for my instance, I'm learning Japanese because I plan on moving next year, or at least in a few years. I really want it to be next year, but with how everything's gone down the freaking toilet, it's difficult. It's difficult, and I hate it. That kind of foiled my plans, because, everything is kind of going down the toilet. I was going to say something. I was going to say like something else about the Japanese language, and my mind just completely went blank. And now I can't remember it at all. And damn it. Maybe I'll remember it here. I can't remember it. And probably while I'm editing this, I'll probably remember what I was going to say, and I'll have those moments where it's like, you should have said this, idiot. But I don't know. I forgot what I was going to say. I knew I was going to say something, and then as soon as I was about to say it, it went out of my mind. And then I just can't remember. I hate myself for instantly forgetting this, that I was going to say something. Dang it! Anyway, I think I'll end it off on this episode for this week on the podcast. I just can't thank you guys enough for listening to this podcast every week or so. Future plans for this podcast, I do this every week with future plans, and it always never works out. But I plan on getting a co-host here soon, so it's not just a one-man podcast, unless you people prefer that it stays one man, which not a whole lot of people will. So I'll probably get a co-host here soon. I don't know when. So preferably, I'll probably wait until I actually move next year. So the plan is that I move in April, but it could be pushed back to July, and I don't really want to push it back to July, especially with the amount of plans that I had, but screw it. Oh, I knew what I was going to say now. Language schools. Duh. God. Alright. I finally found out. Thank God. Okay, language schools. They're a big way to learn Japanese as well, but they're only in Japan for the most part, and they're mostly catered towards foreigners. So, if you want to learn Japanese and you got a language school near you in your country, I want to know that, because I seriously want to know if there's a language school near you that does Japanese, or if there's a language, if your school gives you Japanese and stuff like that. Because that's also a way of learning it, is learning it through a school, but my school doesn't have Japanese. It only has French, Spanish. That's it. And if there's any other language I want to learn in the world, that's Italian. So I'll probably learn some Italian here in the next couple of years. I don't know if I've said that already. But yeah, that'll end it for this week's episode of the podcast here. Next week, I have something very special planned. I haven't done this since the very first episode of the podcast. Actually, it technically is the third, but I got rid of the first two episodes because I hated those two episodes because they were stupid episodes. And I'll probably make another introduction episode way down the line, possibly on the 1 year anniversary or something like that. But anyway, next week, the planned episode is for anime discussions. I haven't done those since the first episode where I discussed Eurocap, but I'm not gonna say which anime I'm gonna discuss next week. That will be revealed on the episode itself. So sit in anticipation for next week's episode, because that one will be another anime discussions where I just discuss an anime for about hopefully a half an hour or more and discuss what I think about the series and in of itself. And I will have it where possibly the first X amount of minutes or whatever will be non-spoiler related. So if you're interested in the series itself and you haven't seen it, which will possibly happen every once in a while, I will allow you to listen to the episode without being spoiled. I'll probably go over the characters. I'll probably go over a little bit of the storyline of it, but I won't spoil anything. And then I'll transition into the whole spoiler part of the show. But thank you all so much for tuning in to the episode of the Japanaholic podcast. I've been Taylor Frey, the certified Japanaholic, signing off. Good night. Stay safe.